Hey, welcome to Top Agent Training. Let's talk about what an inspection is and what an inspection is not. And I think that this isn't really needed for about 85% of the real estate community, but there's that like 10 to 15% where this video, them hearing all of this prior to them attending an inspection, will help save lots of headaches. Okay. There are certain industries where they do things in a certain way that is very intrusive, and like your HVAC tech takes it apart, your appliance technician takes things apart, and they're trying to diagnose what the problem is. You might be a gas and oil field surveyor, field inspector in oil fields in Texas, and you go out and do inspections, and your inspections are for the company you work for, and they're very rigorous and they're very intrusive. The home inspection is not that. Okay, what's really important to remember is that I don't own the house, your buyer doesn't own the house, you, the realtor, doesn't own the house, even the selling realtor doesn't own the house. Some third party owns the house. And what that means is we are a guest in their home, and we really only have permission to do a visual inspection and to do a function test through normal operations. Sometimes people are a little surprised to find out that the way we test air conditioners and furnaces is we adjust the thermostat. We're not taking them apart. We're not looking at all the internal components. We wouldn't have the HVAC taken apart any more than you'd expect to show up to a home inspection and see us with the refrigerator taken apart measuring Freon levels or whatever, right? The way to think of our inspection is a visual and function test only, and it's general. It's not a roof inspection, a structural inspection, an electrical inspection. If everyone understands that if I do a general home inspection and go, hey, there's some structural things here, you should bring in a structural engineer or a structural company that fixes crawl spaces, foundations, etc., they understand that that's going to go further and deeper than the home inspection does. Everyone understands that if you bring me in as an environmental expert who knows a lot about mold, lead paint, asbestos, I'm going to do a more in-depth and different evaluation of the house than the home inspector did. But this is true for electrical, plumbing, roofing, insulation. I mean, so the way to think of it, the best analogy is you go to your general practice doctor, your family doctor, and you got a little pain in your side, right? And the doctor, they take your blood pressure and they weigh you and they just do all these very general things, right? And then after interviewing you and finding out what medicines and supplements you're on, the doctor takes all that information, finally comes in to see you and says, well, it seems like after interviewing you as well, yeah, I think you have a thyroid problem. What happens next? They send you to the thyroid person, the thyroid doctor, who has a whole nother round of tests that the general practice doctor does not. And they have specialized knowledge and they have specialized medication. And there's just all these things that's the doctor that actually fixes that kind of stuff. So to give you the best example was years ago, I had a beer with a realtor and he said, well, I don't know about this home inspection. If I was going to buy another home, I would just bring in structural and environmental and roofing and plumbing and electrical. I'm like, sure, but that would cost you like $4,000, right? So in lieu of spending $4,000 doing that, you hire a general home inspector who does a general inspection on the whole house and says, hey, if you were thinking about 11 different specific people, you don't need 9 of them, but these two, I don't know, plumbing and environmental, plumbing and sewer, I'd bring them in and have them go a little deeper because we found some symptoms of some things and you need to go a little deeper dive on that. So the other half of this thing, like it might not be what you and your client think it is we can't turn valves, we can't turn on the water, we can't light pilot lights, we can't light the fireplace. Again, why? This is some third party's house. We don't know what's going on. I understand that everyone understands that 97% of the time the water shut off because the house is vacant, the water shut off. Or the pilot light to the gas fireplace is shut off because it's the middle of summer. But those 1 times, 2 times, 3 times out of 100, when it's actually turned off for some other reason, like, I don't know, the plumbing under the kitchen sink is disconnected, and if you turn the water on, water's gonna flood the whole kitchen, which I could show you a video of that happening, because I had a home buyer come in unattended with his realtor, and he did that. And I said, well, I have this on video, and I hope that you didn't cause any damage. But we don't know why those things are shut off. We don't own the house. All we have permission to do is evaluate it as is. So if you're the kind of realtor who has a listing, take that advice, extrapolate it out. You want to make the house as presentable as possible. I did a big $3 million house on a golf course, and it was fantastic. The realtor shows up. He goes, I understand all the things that you can't do. So I got here a little early. I lit the fireplace by the, there were two fireplaces, one in the main bedroom, one in the living room, and one out by the pool. And then he got all the pool features turned on because you had to do it through Wi-Fi on your phone. And I obviously wouldn't have been able to do that. And so instead of me telling my clients, hey, I don't know, that we can't turn all that stuff on, he knew that, I mean, he's a high-level realtor. He basically got all that stuff going. I was able to get photos of everything operating properly and show that to the client. Go, hey, the realtor was great. He showed up. He did all that. So I just want you, if you're watching this, you might be a little on the newer side. You have to understand that. Oh, and then, okay, I'm going to extrapolate that a little further. Don't let the clients like handyman dad and handyman uncle show up and start manipulating stuff. There is nothing worse than the guy who thinks he can fix everything, showing up to the inspection and starting to manipulate things. I have to stop that all the time. It's not our house. I don't care if it's a loose screw. The second you start messing with something that you don't have permission to mess with, you've taken on the liability of whatever happens after that. So if your client's dad is going to show up, your client's uncle is going to show up, just make sure you talk to them and say, hey, we are only here to look around. It's not their house yet. It's somebody else's house. Don't mess with anything. I can't say that strong enough because you don't want to be the realtor whose client showed up and starts messing with the garage door, and now you can't shut the garage door, and the clients come home and go, why is the garage door not working? Well, because somebody's, dad had to mess with it. Don't mess with the stuff. It's someone else's house. So I feel very strongly about that. Okay, last point that I think is really important for someone doesn't have a lot of history with inspections is that we're not necessarily going to this particular house that your clients want to buy and going, golly shucks, let's see what's going on with the house. I mean, we kind of are, but really, if you look here, we have very specific state and national requirements that we're supposed to check and go through. So if you were to look at the AC as an example, we have the discharge temperature to make sure it's blowing cold air. We have the label plate. We have a video of it operating. If there's a swamp cooler, we'll operate that. Here's a perfect example. We cannot operate air conditioners when it's less than 65 degrees outside because it can damage them. And some people get mad about that. They're like, I literally can't because if it breaks, the HVAC person is going to show up and say, well, the home inspector should turn it on when it was 40 degrees outside. And they'd be right. And so we have these very specific checklists that we go through, and then very specific things of deterioration or things not being right that we document, write down, take photos or videos of. But what we're not doing is wondering why there's a weird cover over the, solenoid for the whatever. Like, we're not there. It's not scorched earth. We're not trying to solve every problem or figure out why. I mean, the worst question I get is, well, why do you think someone would do that? I mean, I don't know. Like, well, why would anybody do anything? Like, I am there to make sure that your clients don't inherit problems unknowingly. I'm not there to figure out why everything in the house might have been done the way it might have been done. And in any way, I'd be guessing and I'd be speculating. So as you're coaching your clients up, getting ready for the buyer inspection, make sure that they understand that we have a very specific list of things we're going through, and we're happy to answer questions. But it's not like this thing that some people think it is. It's a very specific, you can see how we do it: roof, attic, exterior, pool, electric, solar power. What else we got here? Garage, cooling, heating, air distribution, water heater, plumbing, interior rooms, doors and windows, appliances, structural, and then if there's a fireplace, sprinklers, it's commercial property. If we're doing, there's a lot of other things it could be. But we have to evaluate each of those things in a very specific way with our checklist, and then we will document problems that we find, usually around deterioration. We're not even there, as one last thing, I'll go back to the titles page here. I guess the best way for me to explain what we're there doing and what we're not there doing would be to tell you a quick story. I had a realtor reach out to me a little while back. They had a listing, and the inspector who the buyer had hired had made a big stink that the cold water shutoff on the hot water heater was missing. And I said, well, how old's the water heater? And they said, well, 15 years old. I go, right. So that's not a thing. It's not a home inspection item. It's not, this inspector probably happened to hear one thing about code or whatever. When you put in a new water heater, if the plumber knows what they're doing, they will install that valve because it's a good idea, and per code, new houses require it. So the last takeaway, and this becomes a point of contention all the time, is that if you're buying a 1974 house, that 1974 house was built to 1974 specs, and if it was flipped, they probably didn't pull permits, and so the only time that that building code comes into account is when the house is new being built, or if they pulled permits for the renovations that they did. Other than that, like, there's nothing that says something should be changed and brought up to some certain code just because it's changing hands and just because it's changing ownership. When you buy a 1974 house, you buy a 1974 house. The home inspection is not there to give you a list of all the items you need to do to bring it up to 2022's building codes. That's not what we're doing there. Again, we're there to make sure, the best analogy is if you go buy a 1950 Corvette, you don't have to put seatbelts in it. You might want to, but you don't have to, because when it was first built, it didn't have seatbelts, and that's that. So that's the way to think about it. If you have a fireplace and the fireplace technician comes in and goes, well, the inspector missed all these things. It's a 1974 house. Now they do it this way. Like, yeah, but I didn't miss that. That's how they built them back then. We said it wasn't working, and if you need to upgrade the type of piping you're using now, because what they use in 1974, that's not something we're supposed to write down. So again, I hope that this helps just cultivate exactly what a inspection is and is not, and you can get your clients ready. Or if you handed this video off to your clients, you have a better understanding of kind of where we fit and what we're actually doing and the limitations we have, because again, it's not your house. If you brought us to your house and said, yeah, I don't care if you turn valves and I don't care, well, that's your prerogative. You're allowed to do that. But some third party who owns the house, they haven't done that. Okay, we'll see you on the next training.